Today is Pentecost Sunday. It's the day where we mark in the church calendar the birth of the church. And you can read it in Acts chapter 2. And the pouring out of the Spirit upon those early disciples. And they did all right, didn't they? Having been filled with the Spirit. Like, we're here doing this because they were obedient. I always find that quite staggering. That throughout the ages, because of the activity and presence of the Spirit, we are here able to worship Jesus because of their obedience. Guarding the church, leading the church into mission and ministry, and we now get to play our part in that. That's quite something, isn't it? All right, so today we are going to continue our series in Mark, and I will land it with some opportunity just to see what God might want to do among us as we gather in this space, because we believe, don't we, that the Holy Spirit is present and active in our lives today. We believe that He not only transforms us, but He sends us out in the power of His presence in order to be do the things that He's purposed us to do and be the kind of people He's purposed us to be. Not just individually, but collectively. And so that's kind of where we're at with this series in Mark. We want to be captivated by Jesus. So for those of you here for the first time today, that's what we're doing in preaching through Mark's Gospel. We want to be captivated by Jesus every single week. And I make no apologies of that. Because actually, if we only ever talk about Jesus, we're doing something right. So we talk about Jesus a lot. And we want to leave this place more in love with Jesus than when we came in. Because we've worshipped together, we've read the word together, we've encouraged one another, and we're spurred on by the activity and presence of Jesus. We want to understand what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus. Because I don't think it's good enough just to say, well, prayer, once upon a time, yes, Jesus, I believe in you, and then kind of hang fire until we've just sang He returns. All right, because that's one way of thinking about it, but actually I think we get to be on an adventure with Jesus while we wait for Him to return, to restore, and make everything new. I think that's far more exciting. So we do that, and then we explain and we try and unpack what it looks like to work with Jesus and walk with Jesus in the everyday spaces. So for those of you who are just joining in, that's kind of where we're at. But do you know somebody who can just seemingly go into a cupboard in the kitchen, root around, bring out some herbs, go into the fridge, bring out some cheese and some ham and whatever it is, and just bring some ingredients together and make this amazing meal? You know that? Really frustrating, isn't it? Right? Because they just seemingly whip something up that is just amazing. I remember this time when I was young, resources were scarce in my house. You know, my dad was an Elam pastor. If you've been familiar with Elam, 15 years in Elam ministry. We didn't have a full-time wage. He was working part-time jobs and trying to survive, feed the family. And my mum comes in from work and she's kind of in the cupboard. She pulls out this can of Campbell's condensed chicken soup. Isn't it amazing what you can do with a can of Campbell's condensed chicken soup? So she pulls out this can of chicken soup. She pulls out some peas and some I think it was some sweet corn. She balls up some rice. She has a bit of chicken, and she made this dish. It was delicious, and she called it Chicken Surprise. Because the surprise was if you found some chicken. So we had this meal. It was just incredible. And I'm 46, and I remember this meal as if it was yesterday. Right? But some people just have this ability to create something out of seemingly nothing. Well, the passage that we're in today is going to help us try, and that story does link with where we're going this morning, because Jesus has some interruptions in his ministry, and he wasn't quite expecting what was about to take place in these verses of Scripture. So if you've got a Bible, you've got a phone, they will come up on the screen. You can follow along. We're going to be in Mark chapter 6, verse 30, and we're going to read down to verse 52. Right, are we ready? Good. So the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while." For many people were coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they went away in the boat by themselves to a remote place. But they saw them leaving and recognized them, and they ran on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd and had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Then he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples approached him and said, "This place is deserted, and it is already late." And it is already late. Send them away so that they can go into the surrounding countryside and villages to buy themselves something to eat. You give them something to eat, he responded. Can you imagine? It's like trying to rustle something up from the cupboard, isn't it? They said to him, "Should we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat?" He asked them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. He then instructed them. He instructed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he blessed them and broke the loaves. He kept giving them to the disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them. Everyone ate and was satisfied. They picked up the 12 baskets full of pieces of bread and fish. Now those who had eaten the loaves were 5,000 men. So immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowds. After he said goodbye to them, he went away to the mountain to pray. Well into the night, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. He saw them straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Very early in the morning, he came towards them, walking on the sea, and wanted to pass by them. When he saw them, when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke with them and said, "Have courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased. They were completely astounded because they had not understood about the loaves. Instead, their hearts were hardened. Interesting passage of Scripture, isn't it? It's quite familiar. I'm sure many of you, even if you've not been in church for a little while, and this is your first time in church, you maybe heard the phrase, it's like feeding of the 5,000. That phrase comes from this passage of Scripture. And so the context of this particular passage is that Jesus is with his disciples back in a place called Galilee. He'd been over the other side of the sea, other side of the lake, ministering in what was a largely Gentile region. And so they're back in the region of Galilee. Jesus had been rejected. So if you look in the preceding verses, you'll see that Jesus had been rejected by his own town people. He tried to do some ministry, but had been rejected. He had then commissioned the 12 apostles to go out and do the very things that they'd seen him doing. So he sent them on a mission. He says, now guys, you've heard me teach. It's over to you. So he sent them out on mission and ministry. And so they had... they'd also, at this time, Jesus had heard about the death of John the Baptist, who came to a gruesome end. You can read the rest of Mark chapter 6, that early part, when you go home this afternoon. Just have a read of the context. Gruesome end. And so Jesus had experienced some pain and sorrow because he knew John, related to John, cousin in that respect. And so there was this grief moment for Jesus where he'd heard about the death of someone significant and important. Interestingly, that this came as a result of a lavish banquet thrown by Herod. So King Herod had thrown this extravagant party where only a few were invited. Like, this was an exclusive club. Not a particularly pleasant environment to be in. Just think about some of the hedonistic headlines that you will have heard in the news. Think like that. This was that kind of party. It was unpleasant, to say the least. But it was lavish. It was extravagant. They'd feasted and feasted and feasted for days. And as a result of a promise that Herod made, John the Baptist, who'd stood against power, which is really interesting when you stand against power, isn't it? What happens? It doesn't always go well, and it didn't go well for John. And so he ended up losing his head. So this is the context. The 12 apostles have returned to Jesus, and they're saying, Jesus, let me tell you what's happened. Jesus is really interested. He wants to know what's taken place, and so they're feeding back to him, which is a really important aspect of discipleship. You see, because discipleship for Jesus wasn't just about teaching them some things to do. Like, let me just tell you some facts. Let me tell you some information, and then you'll be a disciple. No, Jesus taught them some stuff, but he got them to do something. So we want to be a disciple of Jesus. It's not just about learning some facts. Actually, Jesus calls us to do something. So the way Jesus worked was give them some information, teach them, send them out, come back, what did you learn? Which is an apprenticeship. Like Andy and some others are working with apprentices at Cornwall College, and they're getting them to do something, giving some teaching and instruction and watching and observing what they're doing. This is what Jesus is doing with his disciples. And so they get to this point where they're tired. Anybody just feel a little bit tired? Like Jesus is busy. He's not against hard work. He's not against demands of ministry, and he's not against getting his disciples to do some stuff that's going to tire them out. But he understands the need for some rest. You see, because one of the things that's really important about leadership is the busy leaders aren't always the best leaders. The best leaders or the greatest leaders come through a point of clarity. It's those that are clearest about the task. See, Jesus wasn't distracted by many things. He was focused on the one thing. And he understood that when he needed time to rest, he would come away, but he'd also bring his disciples because he wanted to teach them some rhythms and patterns of rest. Do you need a rest this morning? Yeah, go and have a nap this afternoon. Seriously. Like, go and have a nap. If you can. If not, get an early night. I build in some patterns and rhythms to your life that enable you to do the things with clarity that God has purposed you to do and take rest without guilt. You see, I think we feel guilty when we're not really doing what we're meant to be doing because we don't know when to stop, because we're bombarded by all kinds of things. Jesus is teaching these disciples clarity of purpose. But they're tired. They need to rest. But Jesus also demonstrates another really important thing about leadership and discipleship and mission, is he was really flexible. Because you got to go, like sometimes you have the greatest plans and then somebody just knocks on your door and it interrupts and you've got to rummage in the cupboard. Because you've got to find some stuff to welcome the unexpected guest. I think Jesus and the disciples were probably looking forward to a little bit of rest. But people see him. They spot him, and so they run ahead because they see where he's going. So there are three things that I want to draw out from this passage this morning. The first is this, that this is a compassionate Jesus. See, his primary focus is not how does he serve his own needs, but actually how does he minister for the benefit and the good of others. Compassion wasn't just, they need something. Isn't that a shame? I wish somebody else would step in. Compassion led Jesus to do something about it. Compassion evoked this strong response in the depth of his being that led him to act. So that's why Jesus said, I know we need to go and rest, but actually, at this moment, this is the greatest need. Because look at the people, they're coming. Now, we read in the passage that it was the emphasis of the miracle was on the feeding the 5,000, but actually they didn't come to Jesus because they wanted literal bread. They were coming to Jesus because they felt that they knew that they could, their needs, their physical needs could be met. So we read later on in Mark chapter 6 that many healings took place. Many miraculous things took place. So they weren't bothered so much about the bread. They just wanted their hand fixed. They wanted their guts fixed. They wanted their eyes fixed. They wanted to meet Jesus in order that they might be made physically whole. But there's also another agenda behind that, is that, and John 6:15 records that the crowds wanted to make him king. So there was something about this Jesus that was so captivating that people were flocking to him, because why wouldn't you want to go and see what's going on? I know I would. Like, you hear some of these stories, don't you? Moves of God across the world. And over years, like, I've often thought, hear of pastors going off and chasing after this thing because, well, it's happening over there. So if it's happening over there, I want to go and see it. You may be in a part of that. Like, so we are drawn to some of the spectacular stuff. That Jesus isn't necessarily interested in the spectacular stuff. He's interested in the deepest needs of the human being. Not just the physical stuff, but actually the stuff that goes beyond the physical, beyond the moment. He's interested in the deeper things. And actually, I think that's the call of discipleship. To go to the deeper things, not just the surface things. I think I've shared before, once upon a time, I broke my collarbone and experienced God's healing power, bringing it into a place of straight, so it healed straight. Now, one day, I've prayed for other things, by the way, about my body, and I'm like, God, could you help me lose a few pounds? Like, could you just help, if you could just do that miraculously, that would be amazing, because it would save me a whole lot of effort. But I understand that actually those kind of prayers are not going to happen because, Ian, you just need to be a little bit more disciplined. You maybe need to get out on your bike a little bit more. You maybe need to walk a little bit more. You need to stop eating all that ice cream. And I go, yeah, no, Lord, but it's really nice. Right, so, but what I'm trying to say is like that's one thing. One day, this body is going to be made brand new, and I'm going to be delighted, and so are you. But the stuff that will last for eternity, like the deepest part of us, that's the bit that Jesus is most concerned of, because we can be physically alive and in the best of shape, but spiritually dead. Like spiritually hungry and longing and not know where to go. And so we kind of look at it in all kinds of ways, don't we? Like, well, let's get into some exercise, or let's get into cooking or eating or relationships or drugs or alcohol or whatever it is to try and satisfy the longing. We can do all of those things, and Jesus knows that those things, however good they are in the moment, are only temporary and will never truly satisfy. And so Jesus is moved with compassion because he sees a people. And what does he say? Jesus says they're like a sheep without a shepherd. Now, when we think about a shepherd, we kind of think, oh, yeah, they're nice, aren't they? They look after those fluffy things that are out in the fields. They're lovely sheep, and they lead them to green pastures, and they care for them and they tend for them. They put them back on their feet when they're upside down and they can't get out, can't help themselves. We help them when they're stuck in a hedge or in a ditch. They're nice people who kind of rescue people. Yes, they do, of course. They love their sheep. The shepherd loves the sheep because that's what they're called to do. That's what the job demands. Look after the sheep, feed the sheep. But the sheep don't determine which field they go into. They will if the shepherd lets them, and it'll be chaos. So when Jesus said they're like sheep without a shepherd, what he's saying, they're like people without a leader. They're going, doing their own thing. They're lost. They're wandering. They're getting lost. They're getting stuck in a ditch. They're getting their head stuck in a fence. They're like stupid sheep. I hope I've not no sheep farmers in here this morning. But I'm led to believe they're pretty stupid. Like they will do their own thing. But Jesus recognizes that this is a problem. Because left to their own devices, where are they going to go? And so Jesus is moved with compassion. But it's interesting that the compassion bit wasn't straight to the food, was it? Like, it wasn't straight to the breaking of the miracle provision of feeding the 5,000. Mark records that Jesus taught the people. I find that really fascinating. That the first thing that Jesus did wasn't to meet their physical needs. No, he got them sat down, and he starts to teach them. Now, you think I preach long. This was a whole day sermon. So, are you ready? I'm just following Jesus. I'm not really going to be ordained. But Jesus is teaching them all that. This is a long sermon, and they're there and they're listening. And they're hungry. They're getting hungry. Like some of you may be getting hungry now. You're kind of thinking, yeah, my dinner. Ready for my dinner. But they're physically hungry. And the disciples think that they're being really clever. And so they say, oh, Jesus, this is really late now. We're going to... And I think they're trying to be kind, like, let's release them. Almost like saying, Jesus, they've been listening to you for a really long time now. Let them go. Like, let them go and find some food. We're far from anywhere. They're going to need some space to go and get some stuff. So Jesus, what we've got to understand about Jesus, he'll always do the unexpected. Like he doesn't play the game the way that we play the game. He was like, oh yeah, good idea, lads. Great idea. Let's send them off. No, he says, you feed them. You feed them. And rightly, I mean, wouldn't you do the same? Jesus, we have nothing. We have nothing to give them. What are we going to do? Gather all this money and go and buy 200 worth denarii of bread? Is that what we're going to do, Jesus? And even then, it might be a little bit short, Jesus. So what do you expect us to do? So Jesus then says, like, what's in your hand? What have you got? You see, because the thing is, we look at what we've got and we say, I've got nothing. Have you ever done that? Actually, I've got nothing to give. How can I do that? And what we fail to realize is what's in our midst. Like collectively, as a crowd, they managed to find 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now, I am no mathematician, right? Really, But even I know that actually the division of those loaves and those fish is not going to work with 5,000 men. Then what about the women and children who were also present? So you could be talking like up to maybe 10,000 people, maybe more. It's a lot of mouths to feed with 5 loaves and 2 fish. So they bring it. And so the disciples are confused. Because that's really what happens with disciples, isn't it? Jesus confuses us sometimes. You ever been confused by Jesus? By the things that he does and expects, and you read the scriptures and you're kind of like, oh wow, didn't expect you to do that, Jesus. Or he does something in your life like moves you and relocates you from a place in the Midlands to the south of England into Cornwall, and because that's what happened. Like surprises you. Like you're part of one thing, and then you're all of a sudden you're part of another thing. You get opportunities. You're like, Jesus, I didn't expect that. It's not how it was meant to be written. But Jesus, you see, when Jesus said they're like sheep without a shepherd, he was saying that he is the leader. He is the good shepherd, and he determines where the sheep go and what the sheep need. And so the disciples he's trying to get the disciples to learn this lesson. You see, James Edwards says this about this moment. He says, the problem will not be resolved by something beyond them, but by something among them. I find that fascinating. So interesting quote, isn't it? It's like, this issue isn't going to be like, we're just going to, like the manna from heaven of old. Like you read the Old Testament, and God provided for his people with manna from heaven. It just it fell, and they collected it and used it each day. Now this problem, this issue was going to be resolved within them. And now this is interesting, because I think this is what happens to us as a church. Sometimes we think we haven't got it, but actually we go, what is among us? What is among us? So if you were at the vision night back in March, we cast some big vision for what we think God's leading us into next. And I'm looking at it and going, Jesus, I have no idea. One, how we're going to resource this with people. Then I look out and go, oh yeah, Jesus, look what's among us. And I have no idea how we're going to finance it. Because we got some, but then I'm going, like, God, the stuff that you're placing in our hearts is beyond what we have. But dare we believe that actually what God is calling us to participate in his work as he leads, that actually the resources are among us? I wonder. But the issue was that Jesus wanted to show the disciples actually who he was. Not just get them involved in doing things, but this was about, one, revealing who he is. So the disciples are in this moment of confusion, and they bring the bread to him and the fish, and he gives thanks. And then he breaks it down into 12 baskets, and they start to go. Now, one of the things that Jesus is really good at is organisation, because he goes, actually get them to sit down in 50s and 100s, and like the organisational principles in place is like, it's not just a free-for-all, there's some order and organisation. Right, get them sitting down, and then here's your stuff, go. And it's interesting, it's like, so as they're going and they're giving out the bread and they're giving out, they're passing the fish around, and it's just like everybody's eating. And it just keeps going and going and going. It's amazing how it happens. It's like chicken surprise all over again. It's like it just keeps coming, and they come back to Jesus. And it's interesting. They keep as the resources run, they come back and they go back, and they keep coming back to Jesus, and the provision keeps coming, keeps coming, keeps coming. See, he didn't just send them off. Actually, they kept coming. I think they kept coming back to Jesus. And the provision kept coming and kept coming. Why? What's Jesus wanting us to understand? Actually, he doesn't just send us off and get on with it. He wants us to keep coming back to him, because the prerequisite of being a disciple of Jesus is that we hang out with Jesus and that we rely on Jesus above everything else. Not in our busyness and activity, but we keep coming back to him because he is the source of life. Doesn't just give out life. He himself is the source of life. And so he's wanting to help these confused disciples understand what's going on. And we see later on that they still don't quite get it. But he's wanting them to understand this, that he is the bread of life. It's what John chapter 6 is all about. That Jesus teaching and proclaiming that he is the bread of life. This idea that bread is the thing that we need for sustenance. Anybody else like bread? Honestly, I think I could actually just live off some nice bread. Bit of butter, bit of chili jam, I'll be all good. I love it. There's something about just a good loaf that is good for the soul. So if you're tired, have a nap, and if you're a little bit down, get a nice loaf. Freshly out of the oven, some butter, your spread of choice, and just enjoy it. And as you enjoy it, you write, Jesus, I thank you that you're the bread of life. I'm not just eating a nice loaf, but Jesus, my sustenance and my life, my everything is found in you. I may have tried other things, but it's you, Jesus. And so they go through this moment. And it says that everybody's satisfied. I love that. I love it. It's like, here's this big crowd of people, because sometimes I've been at a banquet, and honestly, not always left satisfied. Because sometimes the food runs out, sometimes, somebody gets that last vol au vent. And so, there are things that just leave us dissatisfied. And maybe this morning you're here and you've tried some stuff in life, and you're here because you're going, actually, I know there's more to life than this that I'm currently experiencing. I know there's something more, but I'm not quite sure what it is. I've tried stuff and it's ran out, and it's left me dissatisfied. There'll be people in this room, and I'm one of them, that will resonate with that, because once upon a time we were completely dissatisfied with life. We tried all kinds of things, and it just didn't work. It's good for a time, but then we became hungry again. So this morning, if that's you, you're in good company, because we've got some good news for you. Because I want to tell you about the incomparable Jesus. Like there is nobody like this Jesus in whom we're talking about this morning, or who we've sung about. This Jesus is the one who is able to provide the very thing that you are longing for in the deepest part of your life. For those of us who've been walking with Jesus for a little while, then he is still the greatest thing that you could ever want or long for. He is the only one who's able to fully satisfy the deepest longings of our hearts. And for those of us who have been walking with Jesus for a little while, we can sometimes become like the confused disciples. We don't always get it, do we? We sometimes get caught up with other things and think, oh, yeah, find hope and life. And actually then we realize, no, Jesus, I've got to come back to you. Let me just come back to you, Jesus, because, my resource ran out. My resource ran out. Jesus, let me come back to you. Jesus is the Good Shepherd. So if we want direction in life, we want to find purpose in life and meaning in life, we want to find hope in life, we want to find truth in life, we want to find anything that is good in life, then we must look to the Good Shepherd. Because he really is good. Doesn't always say that following Jesus will be easy, because sometimes, with John Townley a number of months ago talked us through what happens with sheep. He was a sheep farmer, and like some of the things that the sheep have to go through sounds pretty unpleasant, like the sheep dip. I don't know what that really looks like, or what that is, but that sounds pretty unpleasant. So following Jesus, he will act not in his best interest, but in ours. It's the pattern of Jesus. It's what took him to the cross. It wasn't because he thought that was a good idea. He did it in order that it might serve us. So that actually we might recognize that he is the Good Shepherd and that he is the source of life, because even though he suffered excruciating pain and died a death that you and I should live, he took it upon himself. But death and the grave couldn't hold him. We sang it earlier. Like, he burst out of the grave because he is life. Couldn't hold him. So if we want to know what life is and experience fullness of life, we've got to feast on Jesus, the Good Shepherd, who is the bread of life. We will never be fully satisfied until we're fully satisfied in him. And John Piper said this: God is most glorified in us when we are fully satisfied in him. So the question really this morning is, are you hungry for Jesus? Are you like the crowd? Not in the sense of you just after some stuff, but if you're a follower of Jesus, have you come full this morning? Have you come like, no, I'm all good. I've got everything sorted, Jesus. Just let me sing the songs and let me go back out. I'm all good. Or have you come hungry and longing? Now, I've been here a little while, and I think you come longing and hungry. But maybe not all of you. Maybe some of you need to empty yourself a little bit to make some space for some fresh bread. I think this morning that God the Holy Spirit wants to satisfy the hungry, because Jesus is motivated by hungry people. You have a read of Matthew chapter 5 verse 6, and blessed are the hungry, those who hunger for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Are you hungry this morning?
Yes.
Are you hungry? He is the bread of life, and he will satisfy the deepest longings of your heart. We desire many good things. There are many things that we desire, aren't there? They're not bad things. They're not bad things at all. Some are, and you'll know what some of those are. But But actually, we desire like to be in relationship and friendship and to be known and to be seen, to be loved and to be valued, to be embraced. They're good things. They're good things. But ultimately, we won't find that fully and completely in our human relationships. They help. But actually, the deepest longing of our being is to experience the one who walks upon the water and calms the storm. You see, the greatest dangers to discipleship are not the external forces, but it's the internal storms. The stuff that would seek to distract us and pull us away from the one who is almighty. The disciples, Mark in his way points to their lack of faith and their hardness of heart. But this isn't to be surprised. This is a journey that the disciples are going on to understand who Jesus is, and this is all part of the process. And in chapter 8, we're going to get to the declaration that Peter makes of, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God," where things begin to shift. But this is a moment where I think Jesus is saying to us, "Are you hungry?" Today is Pentecost Sunday, and in Acts chapter 2, as I mentioned earlier, we see this the pouring out of the Spirit upon a hungry people who are waiting and desperate. So I want to stop talking. I want to leave you with that question just for a moment. Are you hungry? What needs to be dismissed in order to create some space for God to do what only God can do? To satisfy your deepest longings, what needs to shift? I'll leave some of these questions just for some reflection as we draw to a close. But I wonder whether Matt and the team, you could come up and pray. But if you're here this morning and you've never put your trust in Jesus, that you know that you've tried some other things and you've not experienced that satisfaction in Jesus, the life that is available in Jesus. You're here this morning because you're like the crowd. You know that there's something about this Jesus. You're just not sure what it is. Well, this morning is an opportunity for you to explore a little bit more who Jesus is. I'd love to have a conversation with you afterwards. I'd love to talk to you about those next steps of exploring Jesus as the bread of life. But it starts with your need. Do you recognize that you need Jesus? And if you do, let's have a conversation. Because I think Jesus might just want to meet you with where you're at this morning. So Jesus, we thank you that in this place, there are hungry people. I wonder if you'd just stand with me as we sing in a moment. Jesus, there are hungry people. And as we sing, and as we worship Jesus, as we surrender, as we confess, as we make space in our innermost being by expressing our need for you and our surrender to you, and confess that you are the good shepherd, you are the one who leads us into good grazing ground, that you are the bread of life, the one who meets our deepest needs and longing for satisfaction. I pray, Jesus, that you pour out your Spirit afresh upon us. Pour out your Spirit afresh, that we may be captivated by you, Jesus, that we may be left amazed by you, Jesus, that we may have a clarity of thought about you and regarding who you are, Jesus, that we may love you more deeply, Jesus, and that we may love one another and the world in which we live more deeply. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.